Today we paint another miniature via our double slop chop plus speed painting technique. My daughter Sam and I really enjoy the game Death May Die from CMON Games. I painted most of the creatures, including these Hastur disciples, some time ago. Unfortunately, the miniatures were painted using oil paints with both fat and thin glazes over a zenithal underpainting. I believe that this technique doesn't qualify as true miniature painting. I am using these Hastur disciple miniatures as a reference for the painting level we will achieve today. However, I will use our double slop chop plus method for the Cthulhu cultists. Today's painting will mainly focus on the painting of the red cloak via our double slop chop plus. We are painting 10 miniatures. I primed these cultists more than a year ago, and the primer underpainting is cured. The white primer is painted mostly from the top, leaving the recesses and bottom layers in gray primer. Watch until the end of the video for some double slop chop tips. Hi, I'm Don. Welcome to my channel. This channel is supported by all these awesome brands. Also, special thanks to The Army Painter for making this video possible. We start with zenithal-ish prime, and that would be like painting of the model with black primer. And then I follow up with gray primer, mostly from the top, painted mostly from the top. And then white primer, if I have white primer or white paint, mostly from the top too. And then finish off with white dry brushing. Unload the excess white paint on a piece of towel or your shirt, but do not unload too much. Dry brush the white paint in multiple passes, making sure to dry brush the sharp edges and the top highlight areas the most. It is important to note to let dry the white paint in between passes. Dry brush a miniature for a minute and move on to the next miniature. By the time you do the second dry brush pass on the first miniature, it should be dried already. You should be happy with 2 to 3 passes of light dry brushing. This means dry brushing should only take you 2 to 3 minutes for each miniature. The third or last pass of dry brushing should be limited to mostly the top areas for a more zenithal-ish effect. Now, use a hairdryer to force cure the white paint before painting with speed paints. Now let's paint with speed paints. Our first speed paint is Poppy Red, which is a brilliant red color. Again, force cure the white dry brush underpainting with a hairdryer before painting with speed paints. You may use a bigger synthetic brush for painting speed paints. Also make sure to paint fast and furious. Do not worry for mistakes, especially if you plan to paint the details with Warpaints Fanatics or any regular acrylic paints. Now you see in the video that I am wicking the excess poppy red that pooled on the recesses. You want pooling but not too much. Besides, we are doing double slop chop, which means our crevices will get darker later. Poppy red is a beautiful, brilliant red color. I think there is no need to use this same color later or even apply a second pass. You may force cure this with a hairdryer before proceeding to the next step. Once you're happy with your first round of slop chop, we do the process over again. And we dry brush with white paint again, mostly from the top, mostly from the highlight areas, and then let that dry and then apply more speed paints. You may use a smaller dry brush to limit the painting area or simply dry brush with less pressure. Unload the white paint more than the previous round of white dry brushing. You want to apply this dry brushing in 1 or 2 thin passes. Always make sure to let dry the previous pass before doing another round of dry brushing. This round of white dry brushing should only take you a minute or 2. Similar to the previous round, you should force cure the white paint with a hairdryer before painting with speed paints. Notice in the video that I only applied white dry brush on the top areas and only focused on the raised details of the miniature. Now let's do the second round of slop chop. We are using bright red, which is a reddish-orange color. You may paint bright red only on the top areas. Only on the areas with white dry brushing, and blend the edges with speed paint medium or just water. However, it is faster to just paint all over the miniature. I did not thin the bright red with medium. I practically used this paint straight from the bottle.
Make sure to wick your brush on a piece of towel after rinsing it with water to get the coverage that you see in the video. As always, paint fast and furious and wick the speed paint while wet. Apply bright red as even as you can. The bright red speed paint on the top areas should give you a nice subtle color depth with analogous colors. You should have reddish orange top and a darker red tone on the middle and bottom areas on your cultist miniatures. Now I want a more grim, dark finish, so we will add shade with Purple Swarm Speed Paint. This speed paint can be too saturated for our purpose. Thus I decided to thin it with Speed Paint Medium to add more transparency. I thinned down 1:1, but you may thin 2 parts Purple Swarm and 1 part Medium. Mix speed paints with medium well before applying them to the miniature. I applied the thinned down Purple Swarm only on the bottom areas. I make sure to blend the edges to create a nice soft transition toward the reddish-orange top areas. By limiting the painting of Purple Swarm only to the bottom areas, we create more volume for our painting. Also, the purple tone will not only give us deeper shadows by switching the hue, we also create more color depth. I only applied the thinned down Purple Swarm to these cultist miniatures in one pass. But I think a couple of passes will work, especially if you want a more grim, dark finish. You may also thin down the Purple Swarm Speed Paint a little bit more or simply use Warpaints Fanatic Purple Tone Wash and paint on the recessed details of the bottom areas to create even more contrast.
Now, once you're happy with the double slop chop, you could now add highlights if you want, or some glazes to finish off the model. This is why I call it double slop chop plus. The plus is the painting of the highlights and the refinement and painting of the details of the miniature.
Now we shift to my premium Foxbite Kolinsky brushes and Warpaints Fanatic. We are using Sacred Scarlet from the Warm Reds Triad. I am painting the race details on the top areas with Sacred Scarlet and Dragon Red on the lower areas. Thus, it only took me a little over a couple of minutes to paint the highlights of each miniature. By limiting the painting to the race details, I create a higher contrast with less effort. I painted Dragon Red from the Cool Reds Triad on the race details and edges on lower areas for more definition and separation from the base. Now we are finished with the painting of the red cloak. In regards to the painting of the details of these miniatures, I painted a black base to create more separation. I then painted a base color for each element on top of the black base. Make sure to leave a thin black line to create the separation and definition that you need. Painting any base color over black is easy with Warpaints Fanatic due to its coverage. If you do not want to paint a black base or fail to leave a thin line between different elements of the miniature, you will be forced to use more washes to create definition and more separation. So I recommend painting a black base first, leave a thin line as you paint the base color to create more separation and a cleaner look to your painting. At this point, I think I have only spent 15 to 20 minutes in the painting of each miniature. Thus, I took my sweet time by doing freehand painting with olive greens and stippling the highlights of the white cloth to give a more refined look to my painting. Overall, I think I only spent around 30 minutes in the painting of each miniature.
Now, if you're getting value out of this video, do give this video a thumbs up and consider subscribing to my channel. Now, before my final thoughts, a huge thanks to all my patrons at Patreon, Hajime Model Studio, and of course, the Army Painter for making this video possible.
Painting red can be tricky, especially if you plan to paint highlights. Too much highlighting will give you either a very pink or orange finish. Less highlighting is always not good. To create more contrast when painting red, you must paint just the right amount of highlights, and at the same time push the shadows darker to create more contrast. Now you can see that the miniatures are shiny. I applied a thin coat of satin varnish to the miniatures with a brush. The varnish should be less shiny after a day of curing, but will give the protection the miniatures need as we play a lot with these Hastur Disciple minis. In most cases, you want a more matte finish. especially for photography and videography. However, I recommend a thin coat of gloss or satin varnish first before a final coat of matte varnish. Gloss varnish is simply more durable than matte varnish. As I said, I only spent roughly 30 minutes each in the painting of these miniatures. Now our Death May Die game is going to be more immersive and fun.
That's it, Pansit. I hope you like this video. Do like, comment, subscribe, and all that stuff. Until next video, guys. Bye! Now, if you like this video, do check out these other videos.